House Bill 639 empowers the state of Montana to employ an alternative currency in all of her financial transactions that relate to the performance of her sovereign governmental functions, including there, of course, taxation, borrowing, expenditures relating to payment of state legislators, officials, employees, contractors, suppliers, and various other creditors, payments for takings of private property through eminent domain, and payments of judgments, fines, penalties, and other monetary awards in the courts of justice. Now, through the cigarette and tobacco products taxes, the state will receive electronic gold currency. It will then pay out that currency on a first-come, first-served basis to whichever of its creditors elect to receive it until the supply of the currency is exhausted. The anticipation is that as the Federal Reserve System becomes increasingly unstable and its currency increasingly depreciates in value, creditors' requests for payments in electronic gold currency will exceed the supply. And to meet those requests, the state will expand the class of taxes required to be paid in electronic gold currency until at some point in the future, most, if not all, of the state's income and expenditures will be received and paid out in that currency. During this process, taxpayers and creditors of the state will recognize the advantage of employing electronic gold currency in their own private transactions with third parties, resulting in the gradual replacement of Federal Reserve notes by electronic gold currency throughout both the public and the private sectors. Now, initially, this legislation is largely voluntary, except for those entities liable for the cigarette and tobacco products taxes, which must be paid in electronic gold currency in order to prime the pump. Montana citizens may pay their taxes and receive payments from the state in electronic gold currency or in Federal Reserve notes as they see fit. If they choose to receive electronic gold currency, they may also convert that currency into silver and gold coin. This legislation is also basically experimental. It allows the state citizens to determine by their own free choices and on the basis of economic circumstances as they develop the degree to which they and their state's government should continue to employ Federal Reserve notes or should substitute gold and silver as their medium of exchange. Thus, an expanding role for electronic gold as an alternative currency will depend entirely on the people's support. If Montanans do not desire to receive gold and silver from the state and to use them in their own private transactions in the free market, then the state will simply acquire a small amount of electronic gold each year from the limited sources of such revenue that the bill initially establishes. This, however, will not occur unless the Federal Reserve System remains so stable that an alternative currency would serve no purpose, and I suggest that the likelihood of that occurring in the near term is exceedingly small. On the other hand, if Montana's people increasingly desire to receive gold and silver from the state and to employ them in their own private transactions because the economic benefits of doing so become manifest and significant, then the state will soon establish her finances in both the public and the private sectors entirely on the basis of electronic gold. Thus, this legislation adopts a sequential approach. The simple fact is that an entire state's monetary system cannot be transformed overnight. An alternative currency must be introduced at only one point in time, and thereafter the free market must be allowed the latitude to establish a new structure of prices denominated in the new currency at the rate the market determines is most conducive to maintaining economic equilibrium. As part and parcel of this process, participants in the market must be allowed to become familiar with and confident in the use of that currency at their own pace. Therefore, this bill begins the transition on only a small scale, but it establishes an operational structure that can be expanded step by step to encompass at length all of the state's financial transactions if and when Montanans so desire. This legislation finally is also prudent. Although experimental, the bill exposes the state to little financial risk because the electronic gold currency collected in taxes can be exchanged at a moment's notice for Federal Reserve notes or bank credits should that course be indicated. The bill also involves little administrative expense, for the cost of the Treasury of maintaining one or more electronic gold currency accounts should be quite small. Even if that were not the case, however, whatever administrative costs might eventually be involved would be vastly outweighed by the cost the state and her people would incur were such an arrangement not in place when the Federal Reserve System collapses. Certainly the cost of attempting to establish an alternative currency in the face of a complete economic breakdown would be huge beyond any comprehension that certainly I would have. bill could represent the wisest economic investment the state of Montana has ever made, because upon enactment of this legislation, Montana will become the first major political jurisdiction in the entire country, and in fact in the entire world, to establish a sound monetary system. Gold mining and related industries will boom, because the state's economy will actually employ gold and silver as medium exchange. Gold and silver will flow into the state as capital for productive uses, rather than simply being held in sterile hoards as investment hedges against the depreciation of Federal Reserve notes. And because the state's treasury will be able to issue bonds with gold and silver payment clauses backed by state taxes receivably exclusively in electronic gold coin, Montana will be able to borrow for long terms at low rates of interest in order to fund public projects. The first state that takes the initiative in this matter will be the exemplar for others. If this legislation is enacted, as Montana goes, so goes the whole. For as the Federal Reserve System inexorably slides into collapse, other states and their citizens, increasingly desperate for a solution to their own economic insecurity and aware that recovery cannot be had without a sound currency, will naturally follow Montana's lead. A state government's adoption of an alternative currency cannot long remain unnoticed by the national and even the international media. The positive effects throughout the state will render a decision the highest credibility, and the positive political effect throughout America, proving that the states do retain the sovereign authority to solve within their own jurisdictions the thorniest problems that officials in Washington, D.C. have been unable to solve, will be in California.
Lawrence Parks, the Executive Director of the Foundation for the Advancement of Monetary Education, a 501c3 public charity, and our mission is to educate folks about the benefits of an honest monetary system and the perils of a fiat system, the kind we have now. Let me ask, is the PowerPoint presentation ready to go?
Yes, it is.
Are we on slide number 1?
Yes, we are.
Let's go to slide number 2. With the dollar, monetary malfeasance, resurrection of gold, reasserting the monetary powers and disabilities of the Constitution. And there are 3 takeaway points that folks should get from this presentation. It's basically a picture show. It's a history of how we came to this point and the perils of the system that we have now, and really why folks should adopt House Bill 639 in favor of sound money. And so the first takeaway point is that the system we have now is unauthorized by our Constitution. In other words, to say it is unlawful. The second takeaway point, and very importantly, and I'm going to demonstrate this throughout my presentation, the present system is dishonest. And as soon as you know that a system is dishonest, you have to step aside. And the third takeaway point is that this entire system is going to blow up. And the reason you can be absolutely certain that it's going to blow up is because there is no longer any market-based self-correcting mechanism for increasing financial leverage, for increasing debt, and increasing the money supply. In the sciences, which is where I come from originally, a self-correcting mechanism is what scientists call a negative feedback loop. And any scientist, any engineer, cross-culture, cross-time, 100% will confirm to you that any system without a negative feedback loop blows up. So it used to be until August 15, 1971, the self-correcting mechanism in the monetary system was that some foreign governments and foreign central banks could convert their dollars to gold at the rate of $35 for an ounce of gold. And after President Nixon defaulted on the sovereign promise to do that, now all hell broke loose, and you'll see later on in the presentation the effect that this has had on the depreciation of the dollar and on our economy, and it's all to the negative. Let's go to slide number 3, please.